Welcome back to another episode of the PS We Expire podcast. This is episode number 2, and today I am talking about grief. You know, people will say a lot of things about grief. People will try and tell you that you're doing it wrong. They will observe the way that you are grieving the loss of a family member, the loss of a friend, whether through death or through a fractured relationship. They'll talk to you about how you're grieving about your job loss or the loss of a pet, or maybe a loss of a relationship that's really important to you. And everybody has an opinion about how you should grieve. Everybody has an idea about the best way to do it, the best way to move through it. And I'm here to tell you that however you're grieving, that is perfectly normal. It's perfectly understandable, and you're not doing it wrong. You're not doing it wrong. So in this episode, I want to share with you what I have been learning about grief, what I have learned about grief, and some of the things that have been most helpful to me. And above all, this is what I want to say: take care of yourself. Take care of yourself as you're grieving. So you're not doing it wrong, and I hope that this episode is an encouragement to you today. Grief is very odd. Grief is perplexing. Grief is surprising. Grief is unnerving. Grief is beautiful. I picked up a couple days after my daughter died. I was at the bookstore in the section on grief and loss, and I found this book called The Grieving Brain by Mary Frances O'Connor. What I liked about it is that it gave me an understanding not only of what happens in our brains when we grieve, but also how varied it is from person to person and from situation to situation. So if any of you have had a significant change in your life, whether through the death of someone that you love, even a change of a job or career, or you lose a beloved pet, grief shows up. Grief shows up in many different ways, in many different forms, and the expression of the grief also varies depending on your circumstances. So, you know, I'm not even sure what decade this became popularized or when she published her work, but the woman who came up with the 5 stages of grief, the more that people have come to understand her work, they've realized that she never intended it to be linear, never intended it to be like you move from anger to denial to, sadness to acceptance, whatever. It's not linear, and it's not step by step. It's not prescriptive. It's descriptive of what can happen in people when they're grieving. So not only is it not linear, it also is not specific in that not every person will experience all 5 stages of grief. Okay. Also, grief, it comes in and out. So just because I've experienced anger doesn't mean that I won't ever experience it again. It is fluid. Our grief is fluid. I want to read the last paragraph of this book. Again, these are not my words. These are from the book, The Grieving Brain, The Surprising Science of How We Learn from Love and Loss. But the way that she summarizes grief, particularly around death of a loved one, is so helpful to me. She says, coming into contact with death when we lose a loved one can be overwhelming. It can fill us with awe, and it can cause us to reevaluate our view of the world, of our life, of our relationships. Death changes us, and we cannot function in the world in the same way we once did. If you now understand deeply and truly that people we love can disappear forever, it changes how we love, what we believe, and what we value. This reevaluation is a form of learning, coming into contact with great suffering, experiencing the devastation of wanting so desperately for your loved one to be here as they once were, and suffering the reality that this is no longer the case can be overwhelming. These experiences are part of the nature of getting to be born and getting to live. We will be separated from our loved ones in ways large and small, from death to divorce to misunderstanding to unintentional slights. Going through these painful events can also bring us together. Once you have experienced deep grieving, you walk through a doorway to a whole community of people that you would otherwise never have understood and empathized with. You probably would not choose this door if the choice was yours. And yet, here you are on the other side with knowledge about yourself and a marvelous brain that you can utilize to build and navigate a new world. What I have appreciated so much about this book is her insight into grief is learning. Grief is learning how to do life without this person, without the patterns in your life, without the habits that have been built around them, without the conversations, without the care, without the physical intimacy, without the touching and the holding and meeting their needs. With Anni, I have so yearned for her physical presence. In the last several years of her life, her disease had stripped away her ability to verbally communicate. And then in the last couple of years, probably the last year, made it very difficult for her to even maintain eye contact, except on rare occasions where we would catch each other's eyes. It made it impossible for her to indicate what she wanted. And so the caring for her was so wrapped up in this kind of guessing game of what does she need if she was crying, or making sure that I was staying on top of her feeding schedule, keeping her door cracked open at night so that I could hear her. And there's been so many moments in my day when it's like going up a set of stairs and thinking that you have one more at the top. And that moment when you step and you realize that you don't. It's that same kind of feeling of like it takes a minute for the connections to be made that I don't need to do those things anymore. I have had many, many times over the last couple of weeks since she died where I've thought that I've heard her, banging around in her bed or making a noise and she needed attention. I have had many moments where I've looked at the clock and thought, oh, it's almost time to feed her again. There have been times when we've been getting ready to go somewhere and I, for an instant, have thought, better make sure I've got enough diapers with me. And in all of those moments, some of them are more intense sadness than others. Some of them are just a realization that she's not here anymore. But on Friday, so today's Sunday, on Friday, 2 days ago, I picked up her ashes, her cremains from the funeral home. They're actually right there in that little black box. And I cried because it was like this finality to it. You know, when I went and signed the papers that gave permission for them to cremate her, one of the pages was all about, do you understand that this process is irreversible? And there was something in me that said, no, I don't want to sign this. Because it was another admission that this has happened. Another piece of finality that she's not coming back. She's not here anymore. So I picked up her cremains and I sat in the car and cried. And then last night I was up late. Everybody else was in bed. All the lights were off except for the lights of the Christmas tree. And I sat in the living room and felt this conflict in my mind and in my heart of feeling like she's just somewhere else right now, but still here. You know, like I could go and see her or call somebody and tell them to bring her home, that she's still here. And then also knowing that her ashes were sitting on her dresser. And I allowed myself to feel what that felt like, to have that dissonance where I so badly just wanted her with me, but not in the form that her body is in now. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. And before I came out here, bringing the box with me, I decided to open it and look at her ashes because I was afraid to. So I decided that fear exists in the unknown, and that facing what I was scared. What was I even scared of? What was I scared of? That somehow I was going to be more sad when I saw her ashes? Like, I'm not going to be more sad, that it's going to feel more final than it is. No, fear was it wasn't tied to anything specific. It was just this kind of sense of unease about it. And so I opened it and I looked at the plastic bag with her ashes in it and was surprised because they're like a cream color. For some reason, I thought that they would be very dark. And I also thought that it was going to be very fine, but there were pieces, small pieces in it. And I thought, I'm so glad I have this, that I can have this part of her with me, even though it's not how I want her to be with me, that I still have this piece of her. And she, deserves something different than the plastic container that her ashes came in. But I'm taking my time looking for something different. And I don't have any plans. We don't have any plans yet for if we're going to do something different with her ashes. But for now, she's in my office with me. I think it's very appropriate and sacred and meaningful to me that she's here with me, because she is such an important part of the work that I'm doing. I have learned so much from Anni. I had an experience, a spiritual experience, where I was meditating and I had the opportunity to ask a question. I was by myself, but ask a question to the knowing. And all I could say, I couldn't even ask a question. All I could say was Anni. This is before she died. I said Anni, and I just got this wave of electricity or energy from head to toe that was just love. It was love. Love. That's Anni. From head to toe, love. A friend of mine sent us wind chimes as a reminder of Anni, and they're very, very gently, just when I started talking about that, very softly and gently. I don't even know if you can hear them outside my office window. I had a moment today where I felt something coming in, and so I came out here to my office and got out my computer and started to write. And I realized as I was writing, so Anni, her full name is Annika. Annika means beautiful face. And I kind of, one of the things that I have liked about that for years is that when we first got her diagnosed, before we got her diagnosis, the doctor that saw her told me she has some facial features that are consistent maybe with a child that has some undiagnosed thing or something else going on with her. And I was super offended by that. She is, I thought, my beautiful child. And it's true. Her facial features were consistent with other children with MPS. And I loved everything about her face. She had these blue-gray eyes and incredibly thick eyebrows, this tiny little nose, and these full lips, these full, beautiful lips. So I just thought, what a perfect name for her, this beautiful face child. And today I had this zap of insight that also there was another meaning there that I had missed. And that it was that Anni beautifully faced life with acceptance. She never complained about the things that were going on with her. She accepted everything that came her way. She surrendered to what the disease was doing to her body. And she was the most loving and fun and, for many years, energetic child that really I had ever met. And that is my biggest lesson, is to beautifully face life with acceptance of the things that I can't change, and with a joyful expectancy of good things to come. And that even in the hardest times, not everything is all hard, but there are moments of true beauty and grace and connection to be found. So I want to tell you that if you are grieving, if you have experienced moments of intense grief, you're not doing it wrong. However you are coping and managing your grief is exactly the way that you need to. You're not doing it wrong. You haven't held on too long, or you haven't gotten over things too quickly, because everybody handles it differently depending on personality, on outlook, on previous difficult circumstances, on support. Everybody handles it differently. I do suggest finding additional tools to help you in your healing. Not that you would get over anything, but that you would move forward with the lessons in a way that is helpful to you for the rest of your life. Annie taught me to look for the sunshine. Well, because she was sunshine. If you're grieving, you're not doing it wrong. Hang in there. All right. Love you guys.